let me ask you something. Do you believe that hunger or stress cause peptic ulcer disease? What about peppery or spicy food? You also believe that? People usually assume these things are the real cause of peptic ulcer. And then you begin to find some people complaining that their ulcer started when they ate so and so. And one thing that we don't understand is this: assumptions can be funny sometimes. I know a lot of people, some of my friends, who have stopped eating certain meals because they thought if they ate it, they will come down with peptic ulcer. I don't usually blame them most times because that might be what they heard people say or that. But what if I tell you that some of all those things you're afraid of are not actually what you think? They appear so, but they are far from the culprit. It's much like assuming everyone you see in the market is buying or selling, which is not supposed to be so, at least not after watching this video. Now, as a clinical laboratory scientist, I get to meet a lot of people who are worried that after keeping to the supposed rules, they still come down with ulcer. Some will confess that they eat well every time and shouldn't have any business with ulcer. So, most times it can be quite challenging maintaining a positive mindset during those periods. And you meet a lot of others who will tell you that they never ate this nor drank that. And at the end of the day, they shouldn't have anything to do with ulcer. Well, I may not be able to tell the correctness of all these claims, but I can tell you one thing with much clarity, that proper health information can help us a lot in this regards. And that's why you should watch this video. Right here, we shall be breaking down the real causes of peptic ulcer disease, and then also establishing some facts that you need to avoid to keep away from peptic ulcer. And this will help you to differentiate between those facts from the myths you've been holding for a long time now. This is Healthy Nigeria, where we get to educate you on health risks around you. Now, before we proceed, what is even peptic ulcer disease? Okay, it's just like a wound that forms around the stomach and the surrounding parts. So these surrounding parts can include the small intestine and sometimes the esophagus. There's a part of small intestine called the duodenum. Just much like every other wound, it just involves breaking of some protective barriers at the local sites. And when this thing happens, some more delicate tissues are being exposed there. So you see, if it's just every other wound like the ones that happen outside the body, you discover that it can easily be managed or protected or covered or taken care of. But in this case, unfortunately, it's deep-seated in the internal organs of the body, and that becomes a challenge in managing it. Although endoscopy has proved to be very helpful recently. But that's not the only thing. Another issue is that this ulcer is always in contact with some irritants, and this irritant can come from the food we eat, from things we drink, and even from some gastric acid and enzymes that helps us in digestion. You see, that's where the problem starts, because these things also cause some pains while it lasts. So let's look at it this way. This ulcer usually starts from the uppermost part of the layers called the mucosa, and from this it develops to other layers, other deeper layers, which have more blood vessels and nerve cells. So it's pretty much like the deeper it gets, the more blood vessels and then nerve cells that are involved. So you see why the thing gets more painful and disturbing while it gets deeper. In some cases, there can be bleeding, internal bleeding. Although you might not notice that unless you go through some laboratory tests, especially when the bleeding is mild. You might not be able to notice, except when you check yourself through some medical laboratory test. But other times it can be profuse. I mean, presenting some visible ones in your stools and your vomit. So when you go to poo or that, you notice that there's blood in it. So if you notice any of these things, please do not hesitate to see your doctor as soon as possible. Now, my concern is this, that in most of our developing countries, especially in Africa, A lot of people are going through this, and then this is not just happening within a particular age group, social class, or maybe whatever class you can name it. It doesn't really respect all those things. It cuts across every breadth and length of the population, and then the number keeps increasing on daily basis. Like, it seems like every new day you begin to see new cases. So one will begin to wonder what's going on. Well, one thing seems to be clear among these people, that majority of them don't even know how they got it in the first place. They may tell you that it showed up at so and so time, but they can't tell exactly how they got it. So what then are the real causes of peptic ulcer? Number one on the list is Helicobacter pylori. That may sound too big, but it's just a bad bacterium that colonizes a small part between the stomach and the duodenum. Duodenum, that means the small intestine, the beginning part of the small intestine. So it's from this part that it develops to other part of the GIT where it causes problem. So this causes trouble as it penetrates to the tissue layers, and that's where the ulcer starts to develop. How do people get this bacteria? Majorly through eating contaminated food or drinking contaminated water. So it's just that straightforward. There are also cases of mother-to-child transmission too, but the major one is consumption of contaminated food or water. With this now, you don't need to be told that a good way to stay away from this bacteria is to maintain proper food and personal hygiene. Now the second one is frequent use of painkillers. There's this group of painkillers known as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So you can see them as ibuprofen, diclofenac, naproxen, aspirin, and some other ones. Why should you be careful here? Because these drugs are capable of irritating and depleting these mucosal layers and thereby causing ulcer. The temptation is this: most times when we feel a little pain, we are easily prompted to go to the drugstore or the pharmacy to get one or two of these without waiting to hear from our doctors. And that's where the problem lies. And to be frank with you, these drugs are very helpful. They can be very helpful in managing some medical conditions, especially pain. But the thing is, we have to follow professional guides for us to be able to stay safe while taking these medications. Now, the next one we're going to look at is excess intake of alcohol and smoking. Listen, if you continue to take alcohol in excess quantity, it will irritate and erode the gastric linings of your stomach and other parts, and then you end up with ulcer. Yeah, it's just that simple. I remember that most alcoholic products have large amount of histamines, which can increase gastric acid production. So if you already have ulcer, you see that you're going to have more disturbance than usual. Generally, alcohol doesn't really add much thing to your health, and then would rather be avoided as much as possible. But you know, sometimes you may just want to lighten up the mood. But if that should happen, please ensure you keep it at the barest minimum. Smoking doesn't really directly cause peptic ulcer, but it combines with other factors to expose you to developing one. For instance, there's this issue of weakening the mucosal linings and also reduced blood circulation around the parts, and so this can combine with other factors to lead to ulcer development. Now, having known this, what are the things that people usually assume they cause ulcer in the first place? So number one on that list is peppery and spicy food. Yeah, we mentioned something like this in the beginning, so we're going to talk about it again. So people usually assume that when you eat peppery or spicy food, you come down with ulcer. No. People love spicy food and peppery food. I like it too. Yeah, there are some other people that like pepper soup and all that. So these things have a way of adding some flavor or some kind of taste to what we eat. We like it. But the thing is this, some of these ingredients can actually irritate the ulcer areas and then begin to cause some pains and discomfort. That's all. They don't usually cause ulcer. So the second one is fasting and hunger. Okay, this is another assumption. People assume that if you don't eat well enough, you'll come down with ulcer. But on the contrary, people can decide to fast for certain reasons. It can be for religious reasons, cultural, social benefits. And then again, medically, it has been proven that intermittent fasting can increase or enhance metabolism, can also improve your brain function, can also improve your cardiovascular and other cellular health. So, but what happens is this: when you skip meals at certain times, then your sores or the wounds are exposed directly to the gastric acid, which are supposed to act on the food, and now they are just coming directly to that sores that you have. And then because there's no food for them to act on, so this can be very, very painful sometimes. So the next one we're going to look at is stress and anxiety. When you are stressed out, your body releases a stress hormone known as cortisol. And medicine tells us that this cortisol can change a lot of things in our system, and part of it is hyperacidity and reflux. And so when this thing happens, you begin to see that you have more pains and disturbances more than you should be. But it's not because there's hyperacidity, it's because you already have ulcer, and then these things are now irritating the ulcers you have. So that's it. The next one is increased gastric acid. Yeah, we mentioned it in the last one we talked about, but people assume that increased gastric acid production equals increased ulcer development. No, it doesn't happen like that. In fact, the gastric acid are even meant to help us in digestion. They activate some enzymes, some gastric enzymes. They also denature protein. That's breaking down some proteinous food that we eat into an assimilable in a way that they can be assimilated into our body. And they also help in absorption of vitamins and minerals. Yeah, they don't really cause ulcer to develop, but they can irritate the ones you have already. It might even interest you to know that some people who have ulcer have normal level of gastric acid, so it's not from there. Now, the final one we're going to look at is the fear of carbonated drinks. You might have heard that when you eat some of these carbonated drinks, you come down with ulcer. We have a lot of them. Most of our canned drinks and bottled drinks are packaged with some dissolved carbon dioxide. So what they do is that they help to give that fizzy feel you get when you open them and pour it into your cup or jar. So you see, they give us that pleasure. Imagine when you open your Pepsi or your Coca-Cola and it doesn't make that foamy sound. So you may think that one is not original. And another thing is that it also helps as preservatives in all these products. They don't really cause ulcer, but they can irritate the ones you already have. What are we saying in essence? Very simple, that peptic ulcer is highly preventable. That I can assure you to a very great extent. But the thing is this, if you don't know the origin, solution will be very hard for you to assess. Sometimes, if you don't know these things, it can affect the quality of interventions you may have when you are in need. So chances are that some of all these things we are trying to avoid, will end up getting them because we don't have the right information. So if this video has been very helpful, please do well to like, share, and subscribe so that you'll be getting more interesting ones like this. Thank you.